Former President Donald Trump arrived back in New York City today ahead of his expected booking and arraignment tomorrow. The case against him stems from alleged hush money payments to an adult film star.
And here to talk about this unprecedented case is North Central College political science professor Stephen Caliendo. Professor Caliendo, thank you as always for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Good afternoon.
All right, so walk us through. I know this is all totally new territory, but what could be ahead for Trump tomorrow?
Well, it'll probably be pretty brief, and most of it's going to be outside of our eye shot. Certainly there'll be images of president getting to the former president getting to the courthouse. But once he's inside, there shouldn't be any cameras, and it should be a pretty quick process. He'll be processed in terms of fingerprinted and asked some information, and then he'll move up to the courtroom to have an arraignment, which probably won't last more than 10 or 15 minutes.
So I was listening to his attorney, and even he doesn't really know what they're going to do. So do you think the proceedings will be any different because he's a former president, or just because, there's so much attention being paid to this?
Well, I think there's a number of things to be considered, and the arraignment will be quick, and it probably won't be much different considering that he is a former president. But I think that a lot of focus on whether or not there will be mugshots. And my understanding of the way that the law is written in the state of New York is that they are not mandatory. There's a reason for having them, and the reason is to be able to identify the person if the person becomes a fugitive. I don't think that's a concern with our former president. We know what he looks like, and everybody knows what he looks like. So there probably will not be mugshots taken. Other than that, things should proceed pretty much as normal.
How about the security factor here, Professor Caliendo, with protests, all the attention being placed on this, perhaps an influx of people to the courthouse? What are your thoughts there in terms of security?
Right, it's a twofold, and I guess it somewhat is a modification of my last statement, which is the one thing that will be different, of course, is that this person coming to the courthouse is going to have Secret Service escort and protection, because that's what's afforded to a former president. And so that part will be different. Certainly, former President Trump will be secure. But your question, Anthony, about what happens outside, what kind of protests are coming, that when the former president thought he was going to be indicted a couple of weeks ago, he called for people to come to New York to protest. Certainly, many members of Congress, Republican members of Congress, are planning to go and are advocating for folks to go. I think the New York City Police Department has a lot of experience with this sort of thing, and they should be prepared.
Lastly, do you think that this case will set a precedent for any potential future cases against U.S. leaders?
It's a great question. It's a political precedent, probably. That's a lot of P's. That's alliterative. It's possibly a political precedent. But as a legal precedent, not so much. Because remember that Richard Nixon, had he not been pardoned by Gerald Ford, would have certainly been facing indictment. And I think if President Clinton had a lot of negotiations on his way out of office to avoid indictment and prosecution, there was a suspension of his law license, for instance, for some activity that he had as well. So it's not really a legal precedent that hasn't already been there, but the fact that it's the first time it happened would set a political precedent, and so we'd want to be mindful of that.
Good point. Thank you, Professor Caliendo. Thanks for spending some time with us today.
It's great to see you, and you're welcome for the alliteration.
Yeah,
you got a good job. Possible political. Yep.
Yeah,
You did it. All right. Thank you, sir.
Stuff.